The tow truck's yellow lights strobed across my front windows as the winch cable drew taut, the silver sedan in my driveway lifting slowly onto the flatbed, tires clearing the asphalt with a soft mechanical groan. On my porch, 4 strangers were shoving clothes into suitcases with the frantic, uncoordinated urgency of people who genuinely believed, right up until about 10 minutes earlier, that they had the rest of the week ahead of them. 2 police officers stood near the front door, arms loosely crossed, making sure nothing left that house that hadn't come into it with them. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing in my back pocket for the better part of 20 minutes. My sister, Chloe, calling, texting, calling again, her voice, from the 2 seconds of a voicemail I'd let play before deleting it, already climbing toward the specific pitch she reserves for being caught rather than being wrong. I signed the trespass order the lead officer handed me, thanked him, and turned to the locksmith who'd been waiting patiently by his van the entire time. "Every exterior lock," I said. "Front, back, garage, side door, all of it." "You got it," he said and got to work. "I want to take you back to where this actually started. Because by the time that tow truck pulled into my driveway, I'd already made every decision that mattered. Everything after that was just cleanup. It took me 5 years to save for that house. I don't say that lightly, and I don't say it to sound dramatic. I say it because it matters to understanding exactly how much of myself was folded into 3 bedrooms and a small backyard garden I'd spent 2 entire summers getting right. I'm a corporate accountant. I understand, professionally and personally, what it costs to build something slowly, dollar by dollar, decision by decision, and what it means when that thing finally becomes yours, free and clear, with your name the only one on the deed. I picked every piece of furniture in that house myself, over months, refusing to fill it quickly just to have it filled. I painted the guest room a soft sage green on a weekend I'd specifically kept clear for nothing else. It was, without exaggeration, the first thing in my adult life that had ever felt entirely, completely mine, not shared, not borrowed, not contingent on anyone else's schedule or opinion. Chloe, my younger sister by 4 years, had always treated the concept of mine a little more loosely than I did. Growing up, it was clothes, mostly. She'd borrow something from my closet without asking and return it if it came back at all, with an explanation that started with, "I figured you wouldn't mind." As adults, the pattern hadn't really changed so much as it had scaled up. She'd used my car for a weekend once without asking, leaving it on empty and telling me afterward cheerfully that she'd figured I'd understand since I wasn't using it anyway. I'd let most of it go over the years, the way you let things go with a sibling you love, telling myself each individual incident was small enough not to be worth the fight. I didn't yet understand, the week I left for my conference, exactly how large that pattern was capable of growing once it had an actual house to work with instead of a car or a sweater. The trip was a standard 3-day corporate conference, out of state. The kind of trip that's mostly hotel conference rooms and forgettable catered lunches. Before I left, I dropped my spare key off with Chloe, not because I fully trusted her judgment, if I'm honest with myself in hindsight, but because she lived closest, and my ferns needed watering, and it felt like a reasonable, low-stakes favor between sisters. "Just the plants," I told her, standing in my kitchen with my suitcase already by the door. "Water them Saturday, maybe Sunday morning if you think of it. That's genuinely it." "Obviously," she said, waving me off with the particular breeziness she uses when she's already stopped listening. "Go have fun, I've got it." I didn't think about the house again until I was standing in my own driveway 3 days later, exhausted from a red-eye connection, keys in hand, looking forward to nothing more complicated than my own bed. I heard it before I saw it, music, low but unmistakable, coming from somewhere inside, and beneath it, voices. Laughing, more than one voice, more than 2. My first thought, standing on my own front step at 8 o'clock on a Sunday night, was that I'd somehow walked up to the wrong house. My second thought, once the key turned and the door swung open onto a hallway I recognized perfectly, was considerably less generous. I walked around the corner into my kitchen and stopped completely still. 4 people I had never seen in my life were seated around my dining table. An open bottle of wine, my wine, from the small rack I kept above the fridge, sat half empty in the center, alongside the remains of what looked like most of the groceries I'd stocked before leaving. A phone propped against the fruit bowl was playing music through a speaker I also recognized as mine. An older woman, mid-60s maybe, glanced up at me with an expression that read as mild annoyance rather than any recognizable version of surprise. Like I was the one who'd wandered somewhere I didn't belong. "Can we help you?" she asked. "This is my house," I said, and even to my own ears my voice sounded strange, flattened by disbelief. "Who are you and why are you in my kitchen?" A man beside her, her husband, I'd learned shortly, though at the time he was simply another stranger sitting at my table, set down his fork with visible irritation. "We're staying here for the week. Chloe's boyfriend's family." She said it was fine. "Chloe doesn't own this house. I do. There's no version of fine that involves her giving away my home while I'm out of town." The woman actually rolled her eyes, wiping her mouth with a napkin, one of mine, from the drawer I keep folded specifically for guests I actually invite. "Your sister gave us the key for a nice beach weekend getaway. Stop being so rude, we're eating dinner." I stood in the doorway of my own kitchen, in my own house, being told by a stranger to stop being rude for objecting to her presence there. And I felt something in my chest go very quiet and very still, the way a room goes still right before something structural finally gives out. I didn't argue with her further. There was no version of that conversation that was going to go anywhere productive. I pulled out my phone instead and I called my sister. Chloe picked up on the second ring, breezy, like she had no idea anything in the world was currently wrong. "Hey, are you back? How was the—" "Chloe, there are 4 strangers eating dinner in my kitchen right now. Explain." A pause, just long enough that I understood she wasn't confused, she was recalibrating. "Oh, okay, don't freak out. That's just Marcus's family. They needed a place to stay for the week and I figured since you were out of town anyway, it wouldn't hurt anything. They're practically family." "They are not family, Chloe. I have never met a single one of them in my life. You gave a stranger's family access to my private home without asking me. You're being so dramatic right now. It's 1 week. They're not hurting anything, they're just relaxing. Can you please just let them stay, and we'll talk about it when you're less tired from your flight." I looked back into my kitchen, at 4 people who had settled so completely into my space that the mother had actually started clearing plates like she was familiar with where things went. And something in me finished the calculation it had started the moment I'd walked through my own front door. "No," I said, "I won't be talking about it later. I'm handling it right now." I hung up before she could respond, and I walked back to the front step, closing my own front door behind me, locking it from the outside with the strangers still on the other side of it. Then I made 2 phone calls. The first was to a towing company. The second was to the non-emergency police line. The towing company dispatcher told me they could have a truck out within 30 minutes, which struck me, standing on my own front step listening to muffled conversation through my closed front door, as both entirely too long and exactly long enough. The non-emergency police line took my information calmly and methodically. My address, the nature of the situation, confirmation that I was the sole legal resident, and that the individuals inside did not have my authorization to be there. The dispatcher assured me an officer would be by shortly. I sat on my own porch steps while I waited, phone buzzing steadily against my leg, with calls I had no intention of answering, watching the porch light attract the first moths of the evening, listening to the muffled murmur of my own kitchen speaker still playing music on the other side of a door I'd locked them behind. Officer Hayes arrived first, alone, calm in the specific, practiced way officers are calm when they've handled 100 variations of exactly this kind of domestic dispute and stopped finding any particular version of it surprising. "Walk me through it," he said, and I did the trip, the spare key, the plants, the strangers now sitting in my kitchen under the belief that my sister had granted them a week's stay. I showed him the deed on my phone, the property tax records with my name as sole owner. Nothing shared, nothing ambiguous. "This is straightforward," he said, once I'd finished. "Your sister doesn't hold any ownership interest in this property, which means she had no legal authority to grant anyone access, regardless of her intentions. Anyone currently inside without your consent is trespassing, full stop. I want them out tonight." "We can do that," he said. I'll need to speak with them first, confirm the circumstances, and then they'll need to vacate. Given there's no indication of any actual emergency or lease agreement, this should move quickly. He knocked on my own front door with an authority that felt, in that moment, deeply satisfying to watch someone else exercise on my behalf. The mother answered, wine glass still in hand, her expression shifting through several stages once she registered the uniform, first mild confusion, then something closer to genuine alarm. "Ma'am, I understand you and your family are currently staying in this residence," Hayes said. "I need to inform you that the homeowner, standing right here, is the sole legal owner of this property. The individual who let you in does not hold any ownership interest and had no legal authority to grant you access." Her sister said, "Her sister isn't the owner. This is trespassing, whether or not that was made clear to you at the time. I'm going to need everyone to gather their belongings and vacate the premises within the next 10 minutes. I watched something visibly crumble in her posture. The confident, faintly superior bearing she'd carried in my kitchen 20 minutes earlier collapsing into something considerably smaller. Once an actual authority figure made clear exactly how little standing she'd had the entire time. "This is insane," her husband said, appearing behind her, still holding a napkin. "We were told this was a gift, a vacation gift. We didn't do anything wrong." "I understand this may have been a misunderstanding on your end," Hayes said, unmoved. "That's a conversation you may want to have with whoever told you that, but it doesn't change your legal status here right now. 10 minutes. I stood at the edge of my own porch and watched all 4 of them scramble, clothes stuffed haphazardly into suitcases, someone frantically checking under the guest bed for a phone charger, the particular chaotic urgency of people realizing, all at once, that the ground they'd been standing on for 3 days had never actually been solid. The tow truck arrived while they were still packing, and I directed the driver toward the 2 unfamiliar cars parked in my driveway. A silver sedan and an SUV I didn't recognize, both blocking the space where my own car usually sat. "These vehicles are parked on private property without authorization," I told him, holding up my ID and the printout of my deed I'd grabbed on my way back through the house earlier. "I need them removed tonight." He didn't need much more than that. Within minutes, the winch was out, the cable hooked beneath the sedan's frame, the whole mechanism grinding into motion with the flat, mechanical indifference of a process that didn't care in the slightest whose vacation it was interrupting. The husband came storming out mid-pack when he heard the winch engage, phone in hand like he intended to film something. "You can't just tow our car, that's insane, we're leaving anyway. You're welcome to arrange pickup from the impound lot," I said, and I found, somewhat to my own surprise, that my voice had gone almost pleasant by that point. The specific, hollow calm that arrives once you've stopped being angry and started simply executing a plan. "The receipt's on the windshield. Have a good night." He didn't have anything to say back to that. Neither did his wife, who was hurrying past him toward the SUV with 2 suitcases and an expression that had, in the space of 15 minutes, traveled the full distance from entitled to humiliated. They were gone within the 20 minutes Hayes had allotted, herded onto the sidewalk with their luggage while the second tow truck hooked up the SUV, the 2 of them and their 2 adult children standing in a loose, stunned cluster under the streetlight, phones out, presumably trying to arrange a ride none of them had planned on needing that night. I didn't watch all of it. I'd already turned my attention to the locksmith, who'd arrived partway through the tow and set to work immediately on the front door cylinder, moving with the unhurried efficiency of someone who'd clearly done emergency after-hours calls plenty of times before. "Every exterior lock," I confirmed again, watching him work. "And I want the old keys fully invalidated, not just rekeyed to match a spare somewhere. New cylinders across the board," he said. "Nobody's getting in with an old copy after tonight." I stood in my own driveway, empty now except for my car and the locksmith's van, and watched the last of the strangers disappear down the block on foot, presumably heading toward wherever they could find a signal and a ride share. The locksmith handed me 3 fresh keys about 20 minutes later, still warm from the machine. "You're all set," he said. I looked down at them in my palm, small, ordinary, and somehow, in that moment, feeling like the most consequential object I'd held all week. Behind me, my phone was still buzzing. Chloe. Again. I hadn't answered a single call in over an hour, and I had a strong suspicion, watching the screen light up for what must have been the 15th time, that the tone of her messages had shifted considerably since the first one. I was right. I finally answered on the 16th call, mostly because I'd finished watching the locksmith pack up his van and there was nothing left to distract me from the inevitable. "What is wrong with you?" Chloe's voice came through before I'd even gotten the phone fully to my ear, already at full volume, already past the point of listening to anything I might say back. "Marcus's parents just called him hysterical, saying the police showed up and towed their cars. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is for me?" "I have a very clear idea," I said. "I was standing in my kitchen an hour ago while 4 strangers ate my groceries and told me I was being rude in my own house. They weren't strangers, they were basically going to be my in-laws. You could have just let them stay 1 week, it wouldn't have killed you, but no, you had to call the actual police. Chloe, you gave a spare key I gave you for watering plants to 4 adults you don't legally have any authority over, so they could live in a house you don't own, while I was 3 states away. What exactly did you think the appropriate response to that was supposed to be?" She didn't have an answer for that. What she had instead was a fresh wave of the same accusation, restated 3 different ways: that I was dramatic, that I was selfish, that I'd ruined something important to her over a misunderstanding that, from where I was standing, had never been a misunderstanding at all. I let her finish. I'd learned, somewhere over the course of that evening, that there wasn't much point interrupting Chloe mid-spiral. She ran out of momentum eventually on her own, and interrupting only extended the runway. "Are you done?" I asked, once she finally paused for breath. "Marcus broke up with me," she said, and for the first time that night, her voice cracked into something that sounded less like performance and more like actual distress. "He said I embarrassed his entire family. He said I lied to him. This is your fault." "It's not my fault, Chloe. You didn't have to call the cops. I didn't ruin your relationship," I said, and I heard my own voice come out steady, almost gentle, the specific calm that arrives once you fully stop needing someone else to understand you're right. "You ruined it the moment you mistook my home for a free hotel and handed the key to strangers without asking me. Everything that happened after that was just the consequence catching up to the decision." Silence on the other end, longer this time. "I want my key back eventually," she finally said, smaller now. "For emergencies. There isn't a spare key anymore, Chloe. There's no version of emergency access that survives what happened tonight. If something happens to the house, you can call a locksmith the same way anyone else would." I hung up before she could respond to that. There wasn't anything left in the conversation worth having twice. I learned the rest of it secondhand over the following days, the way you learn most family fallout. A text from my mother asking, carefully, what had actually happened, since Chloe's version of events had apparently arrived home missing several key details. A cousin who'd heard through Marcus's sister that Chloe had, in fact, told his parents she co-owned the house, that she regularly hosted guests there, and that she'd charged them $300 in vague cleaning fees for the privilege of the stay, money that, as far as anyone could determine, had gone directly into Chloe's own pocket rather than toward any actual cleaning. Marcus's family, once they'd sorted out the impound situation and gotten their cars back at considerable expense and inconvenience, made their feelings about the whole arrangement extremely clear to him. He broke things off with Chloe within 48 hours, according to my cousin, citing not just the humiliating eviction itself, but the fact that she'd apparently lied to his entire family about owning property she had no legal claim to whatsoever. Chloe called our parents in tears sometime that week, and from what I gathered, the conversation didn't go the way she'd hoped. Even they, generally inclined to smooth things over between us out of some long habit of keeping the peace, couldn't find a version of she scammed her boyfriend's parents out of $300 using my house that painted her as the wronged party. I didn't call to say I told you so. There wasn't any satisfaction left to extract from that conversation that the events themselves hadn't already delivered more completely than any words of mine could have. I had a security company out within the week, installing a proper smart lock system with camera alerts on every entry point. The kind that sends a notification to my phone the instant anyone so much as touches the front door, spare key or not. It felt, at the time, like an overcorrection, maybe, a level of caution the situation hadn't strictly required. I don't think that anymore. I think it was exactly the correction the situation had required, the natural conclusion of finally understanding, at 31 years old, that a spare key isn't an abstract gesture of trust. It's an actual physical grant of access to the single most private space you own, and it deserves to be treated with exactly that level of seriousness, even with the people you love. Some evenings now, I sit in my living room with the lights low, a glass of wine that's actually mine in a house that is, in every sense that matters, entirely and only mine, and I check the security app out of habit more than necessity, watching the small green light that tells me every door is exactly where I left it, locked, quiet, and completely, permanently my